Thank you so much, Franklin. It's always wonderful to be here with my friends from the DC Latino Caucus. And I want to thank you for giving me the honor of welcoming our guests. As you know, I represent Ward 1. Welcome to Ward 1. That's where you are tonight. Ward 1 is the most diverse ward in the District of Columbia, and that's something that we are very proud of. I still like to say that we have the largest Latino population in the District of Columbia. I know Councilmember Todd will fight me for that. And I guess everyone should be glad that that's something your council members fight over. It's something that we care about a lot. And tonight we're hearing from somebody who has been outspoken against policies that target our immigrants, policies that pass the buck, point blame. And you know, one of the things that we're doing on the council is standing up for our residents, right? We've been using the hashtag #HandsOffDC, and that has to do with everything from protecting our immigrants and being a sanctuary city. That's right. I say it as many times as I can. We are a sanctuary city. And also has to do with the ways that Congress likes to interfere. And I think Congress has plenty of work to do, not least of which is overseeing the work of our president. And in the District of Columbia, we don't build walls, we build bridges, right? We don't build walls, we build bridges. And so it's important to me that we're here tonight with Senator Armando Rios-Peter, who currently serves as a senator in the current session of the Mexican Congress representing the state of Guerrero. And he also served as deputy during the previous session of the legislature. The senator holds degrees in law and economics and attended graduate school at Georgetown and Harvard universities, and is well known for speaking out against President Trump's proposal to build a border wall and having Mexico pay for it. He's introduced legislation in the Mexican Congress to protect Mexicans abroad, and has called for a Mexican boycott of American corn to retaliate against President Trump's trade policies, which seems only fair. He has also announced his intention to run as an independent in the 2018 Mexican presidential election. And as this is a democratic organization, I know that we are all thinking about the candidates we want to support in 2018, and we're working together on that. So here's another one that we might consider, and I'm so pleased tonight that we are joined by Senator Armando Rios-Peter. So thank you so much.
Now we're going to hear real quickly from our Senator, Senator Paul Strauss. Thank you so much.
Bienvenidos, gracias. Thank you very much for joining us, Senator. When Franklin mentioned you'd be coming by, I felt it was important that DC's Senator welcome you as a senator to senator. Every time I've been to your beautiful country, I've always been welcomed and treated warmly. And I want to make sure that on behalf of the people of the District of Columbia, that you feel as warm and as welcome as the people of Mexico have always made me feel. It is tragic that our president has taken a relationship between our two people and made it so political, so offensive, trying to create so many divisions when there's really so much that unites us here, really across all the Americans. So thank you for visiting us. Thank you for the words you're about to say. I agree with you. It's wrong for Mexico to have to pay for that stupid wall, and frankly, as long as I have anything to say for it, we're not going to pay for it either.
We're really very thankful for you being here and conversing with us. You have to know that this is the heart of the Hispanic community here, and we do have a history of mucha lucha for our rights, and we continue with the hard work. So we really appreciate your being here and sharing with us. And of course, this is going to be a conversation. I'll be asking questions to the senator, and then later on you will have the opportunity to also ask some questions. So again, bienvenido, and well, tell us a little bit about why are you here in the United States?
Well,
What brought you here?
thank you very much, Celia. I am really happy to be with you guys here. Really, I'm really honored. And well, thank you very much to Senator Paul Strauss. Thank you very much for being here with me. Senator Franklin Garcia, Representative Franklin Garcia, probably after
There you go.
the election. Thank you very much. And to the whole Latino caucus.
I'm sorry. Pueden hablar español porque hay personas que no entienden el inglés.
Ya le vamos a poner la traducción ahí.
Okay.
Or I can mix.
Él habla español bien, ¿eh?
Sí, yo puedo mezclar.
Hablamos español también, ¿no?
Inglés,
Is that okay? I'll try to mix them. Kind of.
Sí.
Well, first of all, I'm really happy, as I was saying, being here in Washington for me is amazing. Every time I come back, I feel great. I feel this is part of my life. I used to live here from 2000 to 2002. It's a great city for me. I love Washington, D.C. Estoy muy contento de estar aquí en Washington, D.C. Amo esta ciudad. I love it because of a lot of reasons, no? Here I studied, here I got my master's degree, and here I met my wife. Where is my wife? She's Alexandra. Aquí conocí a mi esposa, entonces, entre otras cosas, amo esta ciudad porque aquí conocí a con quien me casé y quien me regaña día con día. Keeps me straight as a politician, as a father. So I was just remembering right now why I am saying this. I love this place, especially because the first kiss I've ever gave to my wife, it was in the restaurant of the Sequoia restaurant. La primera vez que besé a mi esposa fue ahí cerca de Georgetown, donde yo estaba estudiando, y la besé en un restaurante que se llama Sequoia. But I really remember this, and when I heard the Latino caucus and well, the kind of meeting we had, it was amazing because, well, it's a long story, I'll make it pretty short. Es una larga historia, pero la voy a hacer cortita. I met her and I was supposed to be making a phone call. Según yo iba a hablar por teléfono. And then she was going back from the restaurant, but she used to have a boyfriend, right? So I was like trying to say, this girl, I want to marry with her. Well, I wasn't thinking about getting married that time. No estaba todavía convencido de casarme, pero sí que me encantaba esta chica. So I grabbed her hand, no? And the telephone booth is right next to the restaurant. Well, not to the restaurant, to the cook, where the cuisine, no? To the kitchen. So then I grabbed her hand and I went into the kitchen because I didn't want anyone to see me, right? To see us. Me fui a la cocina directamente y no quería que nadie me viera, ¿no? Entonces la jalo and she said, like, what's happening, no? And then we go into the kitchen and it was full of people from Salvador, no? People from Salvador, they were there, probably some were Mexicans, but there was this song of Marco Antonio Solís, no? And I really remember it, we danced it when we got married, no? Esta canción que estaba cuando me meto a la cocina, estaba lleno de gente de El Salvador. Y entonces me dice, ¿qué pasa, no? Y estaba esta canción de Marco Antonio Solís, que es de México. I remember that song, and then I gave her a kiss. I love you, I told her, ¿no? Le doy un beso y le digo, te amo. And all the people that were there started clapping, so it was really fantastic. Toda la gente empezó a aplaudir y fue realmente very emotional. I really remember that. So the thing is, I'm happy because part of my life is from Washington, D.C., and now I wanted to continue to be part of my life. Now, as a professional politics, as a politician, I came here this week to have different talkings. I am invited to be at the Woodrow Wilson Center next Friday, and we'll be talking about how Mexico is working, how our politics are working, how our economy. There is a lot of thinking here in DC of how Mexico is evolving. There are concerns regarding security, regarding violence, regarding how things are working down there. And the way I want to put my presentation is what kind of neighbor does the US want to have down there, south of the border. The next and it's a question, the next Germany, probably in 2050 we can be even bigger than Germany, population, economy. Or we can be the next Afghanistan. Drugs, killings, murders, violence. Estoy comentando cuál es la presentación que voy a hacer o por qué estoy aquí. La intención es hablar de cuál es el futuro de México y si México se convertirá en el futuro Alemania o en el futuro Afganistán. And I think it's fair enough to say not only Mexico, but also how is El Salvador going to be, how is Guatemala, Honduras, all the countries of Central America, which are part of the new big discussion that this new administration has put into the table. No? How the United States administration is seeing his neighbors. As you guys said, Donald Trump has attacked us a lot. He put Mexico in the center of the discussion as a piñata. He has made so many hostile actions, decisions, tweets, speeches that have hurt a lot my country. And I should say, and I think it's fair enough to say, our relationship, because the relationship that we have tried to build, la relación que hemos tratado de construir for the last 2 decades, was trying to make a strong shift regarding how we see each other, how Mexico and the US understand each other. It has been a complex historical relationship. But after NAFTA, I think things started to change. Después de el Tratado de Libre Comercio, las cosas empezaron a cambiar. We started to think each other more as partners, as friends, as neighborhoods, trying to analyze things together and trying to solve problems together. And I think there are very good advances regarding that.
Right, well, we're going to talk a little bit about NAFTA.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so I'm here to talk with you guys.
We got a talking
Simple and
point
straight.
about NAFTA.
Yeah.
But before that, I think you have brought up some issues. Now, I know in your work as a senator, how are you prioritizing some of the work that you're doing there? Not only for your country, but for this relationship. So let's talk about you in Mexico and what is your work there?
Well,
Perdón, vamos a hablar de NAFTA en un momentito, pero le estaba preguntando cuál es su trabajo en México y cuáles son las prioridades que él tiene para su trabajo.
Well, my priorities have to do, I am from the state of Guerrero. Guerrero just became famous 2 years ago because of the massacre of 43 kids who were kidnapped and who disappeared, the guys from Ayotzinapa. 2 kids from those 43 were part of my team, or my political team. They used they were working regarding my campaign. I was trying to run for being governor. And well, of course, this 26th of September changed, I think, in my opinion, changed current history in Mexico. It's like one of those historical breaking points where things, or the way things are working in Mexico, were shown not only to Mexico, but to the whole world. Everybody saw this impunity and corruption being part of civil public servants working, dealing, and being corrupt by drug cartels. The policemen who received tax payings were the ones who gave those kids to the murderers, to the criminals, and well, that showed the way it's worked in my country. Eso, digamos, el tema de Ayotzinapa, que es en mi tierra, fue un hecho monstruoso que evidenció cómo está funcionando la política en México y cómo la corrupción está generando una alianza terrible entre los criminales y políticos. When this happened, I said, after trying to make different positions and different actions, saying, this must change, this cannot work in the same way because corruption is killing people. And most of the high-ranking members of my party didn't understand what I was trying to say. They didn't want to do things in a different way. And this, I said it in public, and I said, this is the reason why, that I won't run anymore for being a governor. I was the front runner. I was like 65% in my favor to win. I would be a governor right now in Guerrero. I must say it that way.
But now you've said that you want to be president, so
Yeah.
how are you going to change that now?
Yeah, and it has to do with the thing. Un asunto, yo comenté, un minutito, ahorita le doy la palabra. I said, if we don't change things in the way we are doing politics, then we won't have different results. And that I said to the Partido de la Revolución Democrática, which used to be my party, but now it is very clear that this is the way that all the parties are working in Mexico. Some more, some less, but this kind of corruption, the huge amounts of money, have to do with this kind of coalitions. Getting money for paying votes, getting money for doing campaigns, getting money for generating clienteles, political clienteles, has to do with the, once you pay for that during the campaign and you get the votes, then you have to pay what you had in advance. You have to pay it through contracts. You have to pay it to the compadres, the friends that gave you this help during the campaign. You have to repay that. And that's a huge problem. Tener que hacer campaña política en este momento a través de la lógica partidista es ser parte de un ciclo de corrupción que tiene 6 Cs, 6 letter Cs in Spanish and in English. C of corruption is a cycle that starts with campaigns, political campaigns, campañas políticas. Then that has to do with compra de votos, cash for votes. I found it like right now in my mind. No? Then it has to do with clienteles, political clienteles, clientelas políticas. After that, you have your compadre, English and Spanish, who is the ones that supported you through the campaign, and that becomes a contract, un contrato for building a bridge, for selling the medicines. And there's a 6th C, which is crime, organized crime, crimen. That kind of change is the one that we have right now installed, not only in Guerrero, and this the issue of the 43 kids. That's the kind of change that was shown. Es el tipo de cadena que se evidenció en el caso de Iguala. Pero no es exclusivo de Guerrero. It's not only in Guerrero. That's happening in Veracruz. That's why you found fosa, I don't know how you say fosa, well, a clandestine grave, una fosa clandestina with 256 persons in there. And you have this kind of graves in Tamaulipas, and you have this kind of graves in other parts. So this is the problem we are right now facing in Mexico. And that needs to change. Es el problema que tenemos hoy en México, es el tipo de cosas que tienen que cambiar. Desde mi perspectiva, esto no va a cambiar si el ciclo del dinero, público o privado, lícito o ilícito, continúa de la misma manera. Esto no, this is not going to change, or this tragical inertia won't change if campaigns are having so much money, public or private, because remember in Mexico, public money goes for spending in campaigns. Public money is given to the parties and they use it for campaigns. But it is not enough, and it's not being enough. There's a lot of more money, licit or illicit, that is being used for campaigns.
Right.
Just to say something, right now we have 4 campaigns running in there. Estado de México, State of Mexico, Veracruz, Coahuila, and Nayarit. No? And the whole money we're going to be spending in these 4 states is about the 25,000 million pesos. That will be probably like, let's say, it's a billion, 1.5 billion pesos, billion dollars, 1.5 billion dollars. What does that mean? We're spending the same amount of money just to know who is going to be in power than the money we are spending in terms of science and technology. So that's a very stupid thing to do. Estamos gastando 25 mil millones de pesos, 1.5 mil millones de dólares, 1.5 billones de dólares, solamente en saber quién va a tener el poder. Es la misma cantidad que estamos gastando en ciencia y tecnología. So things are getting crazy regarding money, and political parties are following that path. And it's really impossible if you try to think in a clever way to win to those parties. because money is the main part of the system to continue functioning. So what's the proposal? And I will just say that's what I'm doing right now. It's we need to make a strong statement regarding money in the campaigns. We need to say, this campaign, I'm talking about the independent movement that we are trying to start and we are trying to design and we're trying to impose, to set up there in Mexico, can win because people must know that corruption that is eroding the state, the collapse of Mexican state, has to do with those huge amounts of money. And I think that will make sense to people, and there will be consciousness, and that kind of campaign might win. And in those terms, we can change what's happening right now in Mexico. So, vamos a cambiar esta trayectoria, dejando en claro que las grandes cantidades de dinero que están gastando los partidos políticos son parte de la irracionalidad, de la corrupción, de la impunidad en la que hoy está instalado México. No solamente porque estamos malgastando los recursos, que aunque sean escasos se podrían gastar de manera más inteligente en educación, en salud, sino sobre todo porque esa es la esencia del proceso de corrupción que hoy tiene muchas áreas de México, regiones, pues que están colapsadas y que son parte de la actividad criminal. That is something we're doing, and of course now came Trump. Trump arrived to all this scenario, and in my opinion, is the biggest opportunity ever that Mexico has had to see himself as a country, not against a wall, but against a mirror. I rather think in the wall as a mirror, trying to look at all our problems, all the problems we have, and thinking that we must solve it, otherwise we wouldn't have so many people here, 12 million people here, we wouldn't have to depend so much on different issues. So, no se trata de un muro, llega Trump en esta condición y nos abre, digamos, una condición difícil. ¿Cómo prefiero yo pensarlo? Como un área de oportunidad en la cual no es un muro, sino es un espejo, en el que veamos todos los problemas que tenemos.
Relating what you just said, because it really impacted me, what you were saying was, there are some issues with enough funding for education and for sciences, etc. So relating it to our situation right now, one of the concerns that we have is a lot of the immigrants that we have here say they're here because there are not enough opportunities there. So relating to that, what do you think Mexico can do? I mean, I think one of the things, you've kind of answered that, dealing with political funding. But what else can we do to address those concerns that the immigrants, they do say that one of the reasons is because they don't have enough opportunities back home?
Well, we have two important situations that make people to come here. La gente se viene aquí por dos razones. Hablando de Centroamérica, tal vez es más marcada una que otra, but being from Guerrero, this happens a lot. The thing is, people are coming here from different areas in Mexico and of course in Central America because of lack of opportunities, very bad wages or difficult conditions in terms of personal income, and violence. It's two situations. It's lack of opportunities in terms of wealth and lack of opportunities in terms of living. People are coming to the United States, and I should say it again, people in Central America, El Salvador right now, are going out of their countries because there's so much violence. ¿No? Hay tanta violencia o hay tan pocas oportunidades en términos de ingreso que la gente está viniendo a los Estados Unidos. And that has been, I would say, a condition not only of 1 year, but several decades. We need to change that.
Pero hay alguna política que se está estableciendo, algunas actividades que tienen en planificación. Are there any policies that are being implemented or planned activities to address those concerns?
En las dos áreas hay que hacer política. We must have rule of law. Tenemos que tener Estado de Derecho. Hoy no lo hay. Y tal vez no lo ha habido en términos de una democracia liberal en los últimos 200 años en México. No es algo de este año o de esta administración. Having the rule of law as a way to deal with the issues in Mexico is as important as anything ever. Right now it's very clear that the rule of law is the only thing that can make Mexico become an adult, a real adult as a country, and that can make Mexico to become a serious global player, a good partner, not only for NAFTA, but in the whole world. That's a very important thing. Why? Because probably right now, the justice for Mexicans occurs only probably for the 20%. If you don't have money, if you don't have the correct friend in the administration or in the government, then you won't have justice. So corruption is part of that, and that's the major thing. What are we trying to do? We're working to have changes, radical changes in terms of the Department of Justice, that it does not depend directly of the president, but being an independent one and having a way for having real and strong accountability. That's really important. I mean, that's a major change. And in terms of wealth, actually tomorrow we are going to be with Senator Bernie Sanders. No? He has this proposal that's called raise wages, not walls. No? And we endorsed that the very same day that he was putting this bill into Congress, into the Senate. We did the same thing in Mexico. Right now that there's so much discussion regarding NAFTA, remember last Wednesday, everybody was saying NAFTA is going to end. That same day we were saying, never mind, we are starting to know how Trump is working, no? He's just like a guy.
Well, about NAFTA, how do you think that conversation went between President of Mexico and the President of Canada? Because we have a version. How do you think that version, how did that conversation actually?
I don't buy it that much. I mean, what I'm seeing is that President Trump is using such a lousy position that is, the ones of us who are seeing these actions, I mean, we are seeing somebody who wants to play a role that shouldn't be the one that a president should be playing. I mean, you must take very serious decisions. And talking about NAFTA is a very serious thing. It's serious for Mexico. You're talking about 20%, 25% of the GDP for my country. But it's also really important for the United States. When I put the corn bill, that President Trump was saying Mexico is taking advantage of the U.S. regarding NAFTA, and Mexico is affecting the U.S. so much.
Tell us about the corn bill.
Well, what I was seeing when I was hearing President Trump and his administration saying Mexico is such a bad actor against Mexico, I said, this is a true lie. I mean, this is a total lie. Of course, probably there's some things that you can make better regarding NAFTA. Of course, you can make it a more modern agreement, and probably there are some areas that haven't had enough benefits here in the United States and of course in Mexico. But when you have a single issue, such as corn, which is such an important thing for Mexico, of course, in terms of history, cultural, I mean, there's so many things regarding the corn. We are the fathers of corn for the whole world, and that's part of our nature, no? But now that you see the numbers, and that you see that Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin, North Dakota, South Dakota are selling corn for 20 years, and that they have won every year $1,600 million. I mean, I always get confused of the billions and all that. It's a huge quantity of money. It's 1.5 million tons every year that Mexico has been paid. To which states? To the ones that support the most the anti-Mexican speech, the anti-Mexican position. They keep on selling corn to my country, and they support the most the new president against Mexico. So that doesn't make any sense.
So then you had proposed a boycott.
Well, what I proposed was something, that's the way the media called it. No? Talking it in a less louder way and thinking things together. I love the way NAFTA has generated benefits for both countries. We are now at a crossroads, keeping it, maintaining it in the inertia, probably with no better conditions. That's one decision. Or reinvigorating it, generating even more benefits, new schemes, new ways of thinking about development and common growth for our hemisphere, and making Canada, the United States, and Mexico once again the most competitive region in the world. Well, that's a possibility, and I think that's what we have together. But if this president says, Mexico, I don't like it anymore, then in a very dignifying way, in a very strong-standing way, we should say, okay, so then if you don't want to follow the good path, which is collaboration, then me as a country, as a sovereign country, has to take one decision. Which decision is that? We can diversify, we can see what we have learned regarding our relationship with the United States to make it a better relationship with Brazil, with Europe, with other countries in Asia. Well, that's a possibility.
And with China also.
Oh, with China, well, it's a bigger space talking about Asia. So I think that's a possibility. And right now that we have this president who in my opinion, sometimes is more like a poker player than the president of the most important country in the world, and that's a serious thing for me, and I don't like that, because I have so much respect for this country. I mean, he has an ethical leadership. I mean, talking about the United States, that means President Roosevelt used to say, the leadership, the ethical and moral leadership of the president is something really serious. And that's the way I think about a country I respect and I love, which is the United States, right? I met my girlfriend here, I told you, no? So I think we are right now at that crossroads. So this kind of position, this kind of bill, is to making it very clear and sound that changing things will have consequences for both countries. I hope that this makes everyone to understand that there's a better path to follow, and that's what I'm trying to do, and especially being here in Washington has to do with it.
Well, changing a little bit of the subject, one of the issues that we have with Trump is all the deportations. And what is Mexico doing with our fellow residents who are being brought back to Mexico? What is in place to receive them?
Well, unfortunately, and I have been very critic to what's happening right now regarding deportations. First of all, the first position, the public position of President Trump in office, once in the Oval Office, he said, and I remember, he said, we are going to do some kind of a military action with 10,000 people in ICE against migrants. I mean, that's very hard talking, and that's a very hostile and aggressive position regarding people who pay taxes, who work every day very strong for having stronger communities, for sending their kids to school, being good citizens. I mean, that's my experience regarding Mexicans and regarding people from Guatemala, Central America, everywhere. No? And hearing that is like not understanding where is our human civilization going, or where should it be going. It's just like having a more tribal speech, like going back in history, trying to think, okay, I am afraid, and the way I must take care of myself is in a cave or in my tribe. I mean, once you have Facebook and once you have WhatsApp or all these new technological devices, that's a kind of discussion right now, and it's nonsense in my opinion to hear it from a new administration of such an important world leader. No? So what's what I've been doing? That's the question.
Well, the thing is, what happens when our fellow residents then go back to Mexico? Is there anything in place, any systems in place to receive them, or?
There is none. And that's what I was saying, that I'm so critical. First, the point, the issue of all this fear and all this speech. But the problem is, regarding Mexico and regarding Mexican policies, what I've known, I'm the president of the Committee of Population and Development in the Senate. So I've been very aware of how these people are coming back to the country.
Right.
The thing is that even though Obama made so many deportations as well,
He
no?
did.
Mexico didn't develop and didn't generate a stronger, holistic, integral policy. We're just receiving the people. There's not a way for doing things as simple as this. Knowing, if you are from my home state, probably from Guerrero, from Oaxaca, which are in the southern part, that's the poor part of the country. Probably employment is not being generated as well as it should be, and probably not as well as it's being generated in spaces as Querétaro or as Aguascalientes, which are parts in the middle of the country, where NAFTA, where the automobile industry has had so much benefits for these populations. So just knowing where should you tell a person from Guerrero to go when being in Mexico can make a huge change in terms of where are these important resources. And I must say why I see this such as a bonus, the migrant bonus. These people know, most of them, another language, they know English.
Right.
Most of them probably know new techniques, new technologies. If they are dreamers, they might have college degrees, and they must know different things. This is a very valuable human capital that should be being used in the most positive way, I want to say, in the place where Mexico is growing. In these areas, Mexico is growing 8% a year.
Yeah.
It's probably 3 times what the US is growing right now. Or 2 times, I don't know. But anyway, it's growing good. So just putting this information, if you are in one point in the border, you're coming back to a country you don't know. You were born there, but probably you were here for 20 years, 30 years, and you don't know well how it's working. So probably this kind of policy will make very intelligent sense in terms of aligning other parts of the governmental policy. And aligning not only what the federal government is doing, but the states are doing and the municipalities. So these kind of issues, we are trying to deal with them. I put it's not a bill, but it's like a way to generating a senator's agreement in order to put some money in here. Probably it's like 100 million pesos for putting this thing, the intelligence of the National Institute of Migration with the intelligence of the National Institute for Employment. So trying to deal with these policies, what I'm trying to do right now.
Wow, that sounds like
Perdón.
excellent.
Estamos tratando de alinear las políticas públicas para que si la gente es deportada pueda obviamente ser sanamente reincorporada económica y socialmente en México.
Bueno, obviamente está en contra de el famoso paredón. Pero hay muchos americanos que tienen todavía está justificando porque dice que hay mucho crimen, etcétera. ¿Qué se podría hacer para hacerlos sentir un poquito más seguros o más en paz?
Bueno, yo creo que el tema del muro, ha habido una posición errática, me parece que un tanto torpe de parte del gobierno mexicano. No parar desde el primer momento a Donald Trump diciéndole que el muro es un acto hostil, es un acto de enemistad. Esa posición política firme debió existir desde el primer momento. No caer en la discusión de quién lo paga o no. Es estúpido caer en esa discusión desde mi punto de vista. Pero garantizar que el tema del muro sea un acto hostil visto a los ojos del mundo es un gran activo para un país como México. Porque eso genera una gran coalición internacional de todo lo que representa el muro. No solamente la agresión contra México. El muro representa discriminación, el muro representa ignorancia, el muro representa tribu en lugar de civilización, el muro representa misoginia, el muro representa xenofobia, representa muchas cosas. Mexico should have put in the very first moment, in the eyes of all the world, not who would pay for the wall. That's Trump's diplomatic policy, whatever. That path, it's not a good path. Mexico should have said this is a hostile action. U.S. is losing his moral leadership and ethical leadership in the world if he continues to push these kind of issues. And that would have gained Mexico a lot of strong alliances with women all around the world in 64 countries. 3 million women march against this misogynist speech. And that has to do with the wall. In this case, a mental wall. And that's what Mexico should be doing. And of course, right now, this is, I think, the position that Mexico is able to take. It has been, it wasn't that good, the path that President Peña Nieto took. But now, I think we're still able to put it in that way. And I want to stress, we must change the speech regarding international position, but the wall will continue to be an issue if in Mexico or in Central America we don't solve the problems regarding human rights, violence, all the issues that have to do with lack of opportunities that have made so many people to home here. So there is a problem. How to deal with that? Let's solve it together. Let's solve it together. If you don't want migrants, my proposal is, if you want to evolve NAFTA and generate more wealth in between two countries, then you must pass a law, as the one I presented, and as the one Sanders presented, that has to do with labor mobilization. So it's 180 degrees change. And I think that's a position that will give us leadership regarding the current position of the administration of Trump.
Thank you so much for that. Now it's the opportunity that our audience has to ask you some questions. So, Mario, could you do us a favor? You're in charge of the microphone.
Sure. I hope that the translation is working. I'm sorry, but
It's going great. It's going great. Well, thank you so much. So,
there was someone who was trying to ask something.
partido usted era o es?
Yo era del Partido de la Revolución Democrática, el partido que gobernaba Iguala cuando asesinaron y desaparecieron a los 43 jóvenes, y renuncié al Partido de la Revolución Democrática.
¿Y ahora a qué partido pertenece?
Soy independiente. Strong independence.
okay, thank you. So this is the part that I'm going to be asking you to make a quick. I'm going to ask you to make a quick question, a comment and question. But I have the first one, since I'm the moderator for this one. So here, one of the things that the immigrant community is very aware of is the when election times come, is the opportunity to vote in
DC.
from anywhere in the world, basically, and here in DC and also around the country, in our countries of origin. And Mexico has 12 million people here in the United States. That's a huge number of voters. How does the Mexican government gonna make sure that their citizens here in the United States exercise the right to vote? La pregunta mía tiene que ver con el voto en el exterior. Los residentes inmigrantes aquí en los Estados Unidos tenemos derecho al voto en nuestros diferentes países, y ahora queremos saber cómo el gobierno mexicano se va a encargar de que los 12 millones de mexicanos puedan tener la oportunidad de votar en las próximas elecciones.
Do you want to make a round, or you?
You
Okay,
ask this question and then I'll
okay,
start
I'll
with one more.
Well, in the last 3 years, 3 years ago, we've been trying to generate a better condition for the Mexican people to be voting here. As you said, it's 12 million, but you might be 35 million people. First, second, third generation are Mexicans. And some of them have the two nationalities. That's a huge demographics. I mean, it's Mexico is so big inside the United States. And 3 years ago, one of my main participations regarding the political reform was how to make it easier for Mexicans to vote in here. We had this opportunity of voting since probably was 2008, but it didn't generate so much participation, no? So we wanted to make it easier, because the way you vote is through posting it, no? You fill your vote and then you send it by the post mail. This is not working that much. It was only about, I really don't know, but let's say 100,000 people voted. It's a lot, but it's such a huge, it's such a little amount of people. If you make it through a digital, electronic way, then it will become huge. And all the organizations in the US, especially a lot of them in Chicago, who have been working regarding this, Organización Aztlán and a lot of organizations, told us, make it sound unclear that the vote should be digital, make it electronic, so it will be easier. People will be able to go. So we generated this legislation. We even made it more easy to have, you have this credential for voting. It's a single credential we have in Mexico, which is a very elaborated one. It's a very complex and costly one. And we send money for the people of the National Institute of Elections, the National Electoral Institute, to put some specific modulos, no, specific areas for giving the credentials for voting. And this happened through the whole 3 years. But unfortunately, and I have a fight right now with the National Institute of Elections, they said, we didn't have enough time for doing electronic vote. That's what the president said. And he's a good friend of mine, but well, he used to be well, he's a friend, but I don't like him right now, because he said, we didn't have enough time for generating the electronic vote. And we didn't have enough money. We didn't have enough money. ¿No? No teníamos ni dinero suficiente para hacer el voto electrónico y no teníamos tiempo suficiente. 3 years was the time that they had. And having money, they sent back $50 million that they designed first in the budget for building some stupid building, that they gave back because of transparency and trying to say like, well, we're doing good thing and efficient use of the money. So they didn't have the political will to make that vote to work. And I must just finish saying that. In the worst moment for our migrants, where their human rights are being put at stake in here, and in their country, their political rights are being ignored. So that's a fight we're having against the Instituto Nacional Electoral.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to say your name, your affiliation, if possible, and then ask your question in quick comment.
Hola, yo soy Cruz Pagani.
No se oye.
No se oye.
Sorry about that.
Yo soy Cruz Pagani, yo soy secretaria de DCLC. But I'm going to ask my question. Cruz. Voy a preguntar, hacer mi pregunta en inglés, un poquito complicado. One of the things that I have noticed is the fact that our macroeconomic relationship is symbiotic between the United States and Mexico. Obviously, there are products that we produce that got bought by the citizens of Mexico, many of them utilizing transfers, monetary transfers that are earned here. There is a lack of communication, not only here. I don't have a lot of hope for our current administration to be able to discuss this rationally, but since you have made the decision to run to be president, how do you anticipate communicating that information in a clear and succinct way so it actually makes the news cycle and that people actually begin to understand on a more realistic basis what we have at stake?
Well, of course,
Y lo puede hacer la respuesta en español también,
sí.
Pero
el tema de las remesas.
sí.
La razón fundamental o la relación fundamental de los migrantes con sus países de origen tiene que ver mucho con las remesas que envían.
Sí.
En el caso de México, estamos hablando de casi 28 mil millones de dólares. Es una cantidad bestial de la cual dependen cientos, miles de comunidades en Guerrero, en Oaxaca, en Jalisco, digamos, en todos los lugares que han expulsado a la gente y que ha tenido que venir acá. Uno de los temas más sentidos con los que yo he hablado en la gente, ahora que he tenido la oportunidad de estar en Los Ángeles, en Chicago, en Arizona, ahora con ustedes, es el tema de qué pasará con mis remesas y cuáles son los instrumentos que en términos de política pública va a poner en juego México para garantizar que esas remesas no sean afectadas. ¿Qué es lo que va a estar? Desafortunadamente, pues mucho tiene que ver con el país de origen y el tipo de política pública que se ponga en juego. Uno de los ejemplos más notorios es cómo Oklahoma pone una tasa impositiva local, estatal, a las remesas. Ese es un ejemplo que desde mi punto de vista empezó a seguir la administración de Trump, pero no logra cuadrarla, because it's very difficult to do it. O sea, es muy difícil tratar de cuadrar una política nacional que pueda englobar una masa tan grande de remesas y que a final de cuentas no te genere distorsiones en los mercados financieros. Todas las propuestas de Donald Trump que le hicieron tanto sentido a un sector de los votantes, implementadas termina siendo pues mucho más costoso o el the final outcome finishes to be peor para los Estados Unidos, ¿no? Los impuestos terminan incrementándote los costos acá, el tema de las remesas te termina generando distorsiones. Me parece que la manera más inteligente, y así es como nosotros hemos empezado a comentarlo, a discutirlo, sin que todavía sea una realidad, porque todavía no hay una política pública, es mucho gossip, sound, ¿no? Noise in the net, ¿no? Es entender que la tecnología hoy nos tiene que ayudar a darle la vuelta a eso. A technology and transfers and telephones and bitcoins and all these things, which I must say I'm not an expert on those, but thinking about technology as a way to continue the transactions we right now have is a very important way to do it. But I must say what a guy from Michoacán told me. He said, okay, let's see. I am here, I'm from Michoacán. I'm scared every day of my kids losing their lives because they are there in Michoacán, which is a very violent place. And me being here as a father, every day I must pray for them to come to their house and to be safe. That situation of me, having my kids there alone, won't change even if this costs me 40% more. If they put me a tax, 40%, that was the example, so it was very sound for me. I still have to send $800 every 2 weeks to my kids, so I'll work harder. I mean, that's the way he told me. He said, no tax will stop me from being here. Of course, he will have less wellness, no? And that's an impact. But that's the way he answered me that. So let's do things, no, so this doesn't happen, no? I don't want that to happen. Let's use technology.
Saludos, compañeros.
La fuerza.
Primero quisiera darte las gracias por venir acá a hablar con nosotros. Siempre personas como tú que llegan a la ciudad de Washington, nunca llegan aquí al barrio donde está la comunidad a hablar con nosotros. Y me siento contento que tú estás aquí. Gracias a Coco por traer un compañero como así hasta acá. Has hablado de bastantes cosas, cosas que están pasando todos los días. Yo para votar por ti, quiero saber cuál es tu visión de para dónde vamos y para dónde queremos ir. Porque lo que pasa es que en todos estos países y en México y todo, hay un cáncer metido dentro de la clase social de México y del país, y existen problemas internacionales que afectan la vida diaria y nosotros por eso que venimos para acá, porque ese cáncer que está ahí crea injusticia y falta de trabajo y todo ese tipo de cosas. Entonces, ¿cuál es la visión tuya para el futuro de México? Si tú estás empezando como político, estás haciendo un buen trabajo, ¿qué es lo que tú crees que debe ser una sociedad en el futuro? ¿Qué es lo que tú estás luchando? Porque yo sé que tú vas a seguir en eso. ¿Cuál es tu visión de eso? Yo quiero saber eso, porque es importante.
Bueno, México tiene en este momento la más grande de sus oportunidades en las últimas décadas. En la historia reciente, México y Centroamérica en extensión creo que tienen una de las más grandes oportunidades, que es despertar su sociedad. Su sociedad tiene que despertar. Nos hemos acostumbrado, hablo del caso de México, que es el que conozco mejor, pero me parece que brinda luces para lo que pasa en lugares como Centroamérica, tenemos sociedades extraordinariamente desarticuladas en términos de ciudadanía, y de lo cual las clases políticas o las élites se han aprovechado a lo largo de las décadas. La falta de articulación ha generado que pequeños grupos, pequeñas facciones, hagan las campañas, hagan el dinero, generen los beneficios que deberían de ser para todos, para unos cuantos. Y yo estoy convencido de que el despertar de las sociedades a veces necesitan un Trump for happening, ¿no? Necesitas un Trump para decir, ah, cabrón, ¿qué onda? ¿No? ¿Qué está pasando? Bueno, ese es precisamente el momento que estoy convencido que está ocurriendo, de pasar de las clientelas, que es la manera en la que se organiza México, a pasar a los ciudadanos y a las ciudadanas articulados, con las corresponsabilidades que eso significa, pero con la viabilidad de hacerlo a partir de instrumentos que antes no se tenían para la articulación social. La información, la velocidad con la que funciona la información, la capacidad de que un grupo de personas que estamos aquí reunidas podamos literalmente poner de acuerdo a varios cientos de miles de personas en un tristras, cosa que es real y posible. Las redes sociales, que no solamente es el político hablando y dando un mensaje, sino la interacción y la capacidad de pasar los filtros de la crítica social, del análisis, para generar valor agregado, propuestas, planteamientos, acuerdos, acciones, decisiones, intervenciones. Es precisamente el momento que está viviendo el planeta, no solamente México, etc. Pero aquí, frente al miedo que ocurre por un cambio de paradigma, a partir de una posición extraordinariamente agresiva a la gente, ese despertar es posible. Y además de todo es posible no con miedo y con agresividad, que es la receta que trae el nuevo integrante de la Casa Oval, sino con fe y confianza, con una actitud alegre que busque armonía. Esa frecuencia es superior y mucho más potente para articular a la sociedad que la frecuencia del miedo. I really believe that. Creo que es el punto. Sometimes humanity needs a Trump to wake up.
Muy bienvenido, me alegra mucho que usted esté acá y siendo un senador de México, de Guerrero. Sabemos de que México es un país violento, por la cual inmigran muchos mexicanos, y no solamente violento, por el hambre, que también la violencia interfiere a las comunidades también, ¿verdad? Por eso es que vienen a este país. Tenía una pregunta, usted como gobernador de Guerrero, sé que hay, senador, perdón, de Guerrero, hay bastantes atropellos hacia las comunidades indígenas. ¿Qué es lo que usted está haciendo con estas comunidades? Porque sabemos de que el gobierno de Peña Nieto está atropellando a estas comunidades indígenas, quitándole sus tierras, sus casas, su trabajo. De ellos se basan y comen, ¿no? Por eso es que muchos vienen y migran a este país. Sé que hay más de 20 comunidades indígenas en Guerrero. Yo quiero saber, como partido independiente que usted tiene, qué es lo que usted está haciendo por estas comunidades indígenas que están sufriendo tantos atropellos de parte del gobierno de Peña Nieto, pues. No puedo decir otro nombre porque él es el jefe, el mando, ¿verdad? Y también sabemos de que ahora las comunidades indígenas y el EZL se han unido para lanzar a las próximas elecciones a una mujer indígena. Quiero saber cuál es el apoyo que usted va a brindar a estas comunidades, si está apoyando o no lo está apoyando.
Bueno, a mí me encantaría convencerlos de que no lancen una candidata o candidato propio, sino que me apoyen a mí. Pero bueno, ese es convencer de que eso es posible.
Es para presidenciales.
Es correcto.
No locales, presidenciales.
Yo estoy corriendo para presidente, pues, hombre, tengo que poner de acuerdo ahí a la gente. Yo tengo buena amistad con importantes grupos de organizaciones indígenas. Fui secretario de Desarrollo del Campo en Guerrero, y ahí, pues, entre las organizaciones cafetaleras, que en su mayoría son parte de la montaña es la parte más pobre de México, y esa a mí me tocaba trabajar como secretario a nivel estatal. Y hay un ejemplo que a mí me encanta retomar de la organización indígena. Las policías comunitarias de la parte de esa región del estado de Guerrero, a mí me ha enseñado que este tipo de organización, la que yo menciono en términos de articulación ciudadana, pues ha sido posible por lo menos en el caso de Guerrero desde hace 20 años. Miren, hace 20 años en el caso de Guerrero, en estas localidades, la policía, en contubernio con los criminales de aquel entonces, empezaron a secuestrar y a violar mujeres de estas zonas, indígenas mayoritariamente. Y cuando los indígenas tenían organizados, aprendido a una persona, a un criminal, llegaban y se lo entregaban al Ministerio Público, que es nuestra área de investigación, el FBI, ¿no? Llegaban y entregaban a estos actores para que los llevaran al juez y por la corrupción imperante terminaban soltándolos. ¿Qué fue lo que encontraron? Que el sistema estaba corrompido y que era parte de una dinámica que le estaba afectando la vida cotidiana. Entonces decidieron organizarse ya no como un asunto de coyuntura, sino empezar a que las asambleas de barrio, las asambleas de las comunidades indígenas, empezaran a votar quién debería ser el policía. Armando Ríos Peter, si era votado, pues no podía siquiera decir que no, le tocaba porque era una suerte de mandato y un privilegio por parte de la comunidad. La policía comunitaria desterró la actividad criminal de la que estaba sufriendo esta área. Ese es un modelo que nosotros hemos venido planteando a replicarse en distintos espacios y en distintos territorios, no específicamente indígenas. Me parece que ese tipo de modelo organizativo pues es mucho más potente que lo que tenemos hoy, porque ahí es a donde se genera la inteligencia de la política criminal. ¿Quién sabe quién es el criminal? Pues lo sabe el vecino, lo sabe la persona que vive en algún lugar y sabe que alguien está en malos pasos porque lo conoce desde hace 10 o 20 años porque estudió con él. Ese tipo de inteligencia es fundamental rescatarlo para acabar con la violencia en México. Y es un tipo de trabajo que por lo menos yo, porque conozco a estas organizaciones, he tratado de venir empujando. Creo que en esa lógica el trabajo con los grupos indígenas no solamente es verlos como si fueran algo distinto, sino es un aprendizaje organizativo que le sirve no solo a su comunidad, sino al resto del país. Es ahí donde yo he estado trabajando.
My name is Mateo Lieb. I wanted to thank you so much for speaking on all these various topics. Keep my question brief. As one sees sort of an international trend towards these nationalism movements, you talked about the need for collaboration between the United States and Mexico. What do you think it's going to take to reverse this trend that we're seeing with Brexit, with Trump, with what's going on in France, to sort of promote that need for international cooperation, not just on economic fronts, but on crime and on the many other things that all our countries could work together to solve?
Well, first of all, I think reality, the truth, no, the truth about the things and not the things that we've been hearing and probably knowing in real terms what is going on regarding our relationship. I'm talking about Mexico and the US. I think as the 100 years had already passed regarding Trump's administration, we've seen so much discussion regarding things that were put on the table during the campaign that cannot be delivered. Taking NAFTA out, finishing with it, in my opinion, doesn't have to do with a call, doesn't have to do with being able to hear some other president. It has to do with reality. And the reality has, the main part of reality is that we both as countries get benefits from this trade. It's more than $550 billion a year. I mean, that's a huge amount of money. That's 15 million employments in Mexico, but some 20 million in between employments and families that are getting benefits because of NAFTA. So that's the reality, no? So first of all, reality, and talking about it, and showing it, and stressing the points, as my bill, what was one of the most important political views. Take attention of what's happening right now with this speech. That's what I wanted to show, and I wanted specifically Washington and Capitol Hill knowing what is going on regarding Trump's position. Because when I had Iowa senator asking who is Rios Peter, who is this guy who was talking about the boycott to our corn? Then I said, okay, this is starting to work. No? Because I know how Washington works. I know that Washington is not only as it used to be in Mexico, and sometimes they try to bring it back, or we're kind of in the middle. Here in Washington, you have counterparts of power, and you have a more fragmented power. That's why I'm here right now. I want to know and hear what are the think tanks thinking. I want to know what are the Republicans thinking. I want to know what are the Democrats thinking. I want to know who could be our allies regarding migration, regarding trade, regarding security. How can we change, and that will be my second position, how can we change this narrative? Because we've had 20 good years, or 22 or 23 good years regarding common work, that we got lazy. And we didn't reinvigorate, regenerate the narrative of the positive things that we can do together. And that's why people are afraid. People are afraid in Iowa seeing people of brown skin. Why are they afraid? Because they are humans. I mean, people get afraid of things. And there are two things always to do against fear. Talk, dialogue, show that difference, the specific ones that you see are not as bad as you might be biased thinking, but that there are good things that you could do together. And that's why I think about civilization. I mean, it's not only criticizing Trump, that's what's happening in the world. Probably that's why France is discussing what it's discussing, but probably that's why Macron is doing what he's doing. Macron is generating a new kind of dialogue, a new kind of speech, a new kind of thinking, how France, their society, can generate a new kind of leadership. Well, here unfortunately won the bad narrative. But that's an opportunity for saying, hey, that path is not good for us, and that path doesn't have enough support. Well, let's build the future. Let's grab the future. So that's the way I like to think. Reality and building a new narrative through new alliances. That's what we're doing right now.
Excellent. So I'm gonna make you harder a little bit. I'm gonna send you 3 questions at once and then see how you can do that. Okay, I'm gonna start with Hector Rodriguez.
I don't know how we're doing. Just a minute. I don't know how we were doing with time, but my colleagues will tell me.
It's up to you.
Thank you.
Senator, welcome to the 51st state of America.
That's good.
Okay? Welcome to the 51st state. Senator, I am not Mexican, but when Mr. Trump spoke that way about Mexicans, all of us took to the streets. I want you to know that. We took it very seriously. We received a slap, the whole Latino community in Washington, and we're still in the streets. We're still in the streets demonstrating against him. Now, the wall that he wants to build, he has built a wall around himself. We're beginning to see that what goes around comes around, and that wall he has built around himself. And we're seeing that every day. My question is this: the digital age. What are you doing, not you, but what is Mexico doing to come into the digital age? Because they have to be competitive and communicate with the rest of the world.
Yes. Sorry, your name is?
Hector.
Hector. It's great. Gracias.
Mi nombre es José Gutiérrez, soy parte de la mesa directiva y soy mexicano también. Y me sentí muy ofendido cuando el señor Trump hizo esas declaraciones acerca de mi comunidad. Y mi pregunta es de que tenemos con lo del muro, yo sé que eso va a afectar no solo a México, pero también a Centroamérica y a otros países, quizás sudamericanos. Yo no estoy tan convencido que se vaya a lograr. Y yo quería preguntarle a usted qué pensaba. My name is Jose Gutierrez. I'm part of the board of directors of DCLC. And I was just mentioned about the wall in the border. And it is me, I'm thinking that they may maybe not be completed, that wall. I mean, what do you think?
They won't build the wall. That's what you think.
Sí, yo pienso que no se va a construir pienso, tengo ese presentimiento, que no se va a construir. Tengo ese...
Y el muro lo estamos pagando nosotros acá.
Está bien.
¿Por qué razón? Las empresas comerciales les han aumentado el precio y hemos estado comprando el aguacate ahora. Y gracias a México que digo, no,
Orden.
vamos a pagar el muro.
Okay.
Pero somos nosotros los ciudadanos acá que nos vamos a pagar.
One last question here. So, say your name and your...
My name is Lawrence Kilborn. I'm a retired civil servant, specifically from the Air Force. About Mexicans voting in Mexicans living in the United States voting in Mexican elections. Digital sounds like a good idea, but wouldn't a lot of Mexicans that are here illegally be frightened to vote in the Mexican election for fear it might expose them, and even Mexicans who are here legally feel reluctant to do so because of the attention it might draw to them. Right now, there's a lot of dirty Republican tricks to keep people, mostly of lower social class and of various colors, from voting in American elections.
Yeah, Lawrence, right? I would say that's the three questions, right?
Three questions right now.
Yeah, of course that's a problem for people who don't have documents. Trying to go to the consulate in Arizona, this is what they have told me, is impossible because there are so many raids because of the SB 40, SB 140. 170, that's the name. Well, the ugly one, the SB ugly one, no? So SB 140, something like that. Sorry for forgetting. And of course, that's something difficult, no? Going into the consulate to get your credential and to try to vote, it's difficult, but that's a path that we must follow. I've talked to you in this conference about thinking about mobilization of labor. I mean, we have a lot of problems regarding migration, and we must recognize and we must be very clear and fair that the U.S. and people in the U.S. in a correct way, they say these people don't have documents, they are violating the laws. That's something that a lot of times you don't say, no? We must put that in the table as well, okay? Why has that been occurring? Because how the labor market in the US has worked. I mean, has that happened just because the United States didn't know? They didn't notice this suddenly happened, and suddenly there came this president or this candidate that say, hey, something wrong is happening. That's nonsense. I mean, if we want to build a good path, then we must start analyzing our current situations in a very fair, clear, and transparent way. Migration, undocumented migration, has to do with the way we had allowed the labor markets in between the US and Mexico to work. No? Well, probably that is not the way politicians analyze things, but that's the way we should analyze these things if we want to build and to re-engineer the way we see our common future. That's my point. So right now, if you put it that way, that's what my bill tries to say, raise wages, not walls, and let's try to generate a more mobile labor market that can help both countries to deal with the labor issue and to generate competitiveness. That has to do with digital. That has to do with the technology. That has to do with the new areas where competitiveness in the world is being understood. It's about humans. It's about human capital. It's about education. It's about giving them tools to have health. I mean, that's prosperity. And that's a huge speech. So right now, humanity is at stake because those who like the past want to say the past was always better. And that's why you have Le Pen, not only Trump. That's why you have those guys who voted for Brexit. But right now, we have more young people that could have that understand pretty much better that going for voting in Brexit was important, that voting in Trump's election was important. I'm trying that this cohort in Mexico goes to vote because it's their future, grabbing their future what is at stake. And that has to do with digital. And Mexico, well, someone at the New York Times made me that kind of question, and I said, well, we're not doing very good regarding investing in digital technology. Why? Because we're spending money in campaigns. Well, our resources, scarce resources, we are not putting them in the right place, but we have them. So we should be doing that, no? And the final thing, it will be, well, I don't think that the wall will be built. But I might be wrong. I'm seeing that it's part of a speech that is getting every day, every time, more problems regarding budget, regarding support. But the issue has to do with a political voice and position that needs a new narrative. If that doesn't happen, probably Donald Trump will say, well, we put a lot of drones and we made a virtual wall. It's pretty much better. I do better walls, no? Something like that. But, I don't know. Nobody does better wall than me. I do.
This is going to be the last hardball. We're gonna. It's a combo of 4 questions.
Okay, great.
I know everybody's here. So
Just, I want to say something.
3 and 4. Yeah.
Just I want to say something to Hector. I was part of the new constitution in the city, Mexico City. I was congressman for the new constitution, and we generated the 32 state. That Distrito Federal, which used to be our capital, which was a copy of District of Columbia, now is a new state. So probably we can show some things regarding that.
And Senator Franklin, Senator Strauss, and all these folks here, including Hector, who's been fighting for a long time as well, and many who I can't see are fighting every day to achieve statehood.
Well, count on me on what I can show you the things we did. I mean, it's an very interesting challenge, but it's possible and it's really good.
You're right.
Bienvenidos. Mi nombre es Dustin Cantor. Voy a ser el alcalde independiente de Washington, D.C. la próxima año.
Eso, chico.
Mi pregunta para ti es, muchas personas en el mundo dicen los Estados Unidos es la mejor democracia, pero en Washington, D.C. las personas no votan igual, no senadores on Capitol Hill. ¿Qué piensas?
What do you mean that they don't vote the same?
They don't have representation in Congress.
Yeah.
So we're technically elect a representative.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
So, 2 more questions.
Well, they do have representation from the senator and from the representative, but they're not allowed to vote by the Congress. It's the same people.
But we did elect them.
You did
We
elect
did
them.
elect them. They're elected officials of the District of Columbia.
They are not allowed to
But
vote.
we don't have say for cabinet confirmations, for Supreme Court nominations. We have no voice.
Public debt.
Yeah, no. Our budget.
Okay, the budget. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Buenas tardes, soy Seferina, soy de México, de Puebla, México, y yo trabajé 10 años como maestra de educación allá en zona suburbana, pero cuando estudiamos el desarrollo del socioeconómico de la sociedad, de todo el país, recuerdo que las zonas cafetaleras están en manos de gente de dinero. Sigue habiendo la zona cafetalera la sierra Madre Oriental. Ahí hay muchas zonas cafetaleras, pero los que las tienen son los terratenientes, gente de dinero, de mucho dinero. Y ahí sigue habiendo, bueno, yo no he ido más de 20 años, entonces en ese tiempo los que estaban marginados eran los indígenas. Y creo que eso no está cambiando todavía, porque mi hermana era médico del Instituto Nacional Indigenista y en unas vacaciones yo la acompañé, caminábamos 4 horas a pie, porque subimos la sierra y caminamos más y no había manera de que un carro entrara o una bicicleta, era la sierra pues. Entonces, ¿qué va a hacer? ¿Qué haría con esa comunidad de indígenas? Porque yo pienso que en México todavía hay mucho abuso con la gente indígena, que muchas veces no tienen la facilidad de tener educación y de alcanzar los privilegios que tiene cualquier ciudadano de México.
Gracias.
Gracias, Karina.
Buenas noches, senador. Muchas gracias por su presencia, por compartir este tiempo con nosotros y arrojar tanta luz para temas tan importantes como este. Mi pregunta es breve. Mi nombre es Rosy Ruiz, Transit Director para WWGB. Mi pregunta es la siguiente. Retomando el tema del temor colectivo que existe hoy día de la comunidad latina y retomando también el tema de una frase que usted dijo, debemos luchar juntos. ¿De qué manera cree usted que podría la comunidad latina empoderarse para evitar que sus derechos sean vulnerados o atropellados, como le quiera llamar? Y otra cosa también, una segunda preguntita, ¿de qué manera le preocupa el alto índice de suicidios de los deportados en México? ¿Ha pensado usted en algún programa para ellos? ¿Cómo usted podría solucionar ese problema que está afectando ahora mismo a México? Muchísimas gracias.
Buenas noches para todos, mi nombre es Orlando Navarro. Me da mucho gusto estar en esta reunión. Quiero hacerle 3 preguntas que tenemos enfrente. Un poquito breve voy a hacer. Si usted fuera en el futuro el comandante en jefe o el presidente de México, ¿qué visión o estrategia usaría para abolir o erradicar el crimen organizado y el narcotráfico en México? Tengo otra, la segunda dice, ¿cuál ha sido el origen del crimen organizado en México? ¿Hace cuántas décadas? Si tiene usted conocimiento. La tercera dice, ¿qué política o estrategia usaría usted para tener lazos estrechos con los Estados Unidos y derribar muros?
Good hardball, Senator. Let's see how you do it. Thank you.
Okay. Empezaría con la última batería de Orlando. Yo creo que la idea de construir puentes, no muros, es dialogar e identificar los problemas. He tratado de decirlo a lo largo de esta conversación. Creo que lo que hoy se vive, o lo que vivió la elección de Estados Unidos, fue miedo a lo que no comprende, y en lo cual muchos gaps, muchos hoyos de esa narrativa, pues las llenó el miedo, las llenó el discurso de no conocimiento, de ignorancia, etc. Y bueno, ese es el resultado que hoy tenemos. Pero esa no es la realidad. La realidad es una realidad pues mucho más positiva que la mala realidad que se vendió en una narrativa distorsionada. Ahí donde están las personas que día con día trabajan duro, hablo de la comunidad de ustedes aquí, digamos aquí en el Latin Caucus, ¿no? Hay gente que si se comunica su experiencia de vida, simple y sencillamente un día de trabajo siendo un buen ciudadano, un día de trabajo pagando impuestos, un día de trabajo siendo líderes como hoy son líderes ustedes en la comunidad, tratando de incidir, tratando de organizarse, tratando de ser emprendedores, respetando el rule of law. Bueno, todo eso es una historia que me parece que tiene que ser sabia e inteligentemente comunicada, porque hay otra parte, digamos, de la gente que vive en este bello país que no la conoce o que la ignora. O sea, hay que comunicarla, porque al comunicarla lo que se generen sean puentes de diálogo, y no solamente puentes, digamos, para pasar el río Bravo, se generan puentes interpersonales y se genera empatía y se permite algo que es en lo que se debe de basar la política moderna. La política moderna tiene que ver con ponerse en los zapatos del otro. Las graves distancias que hoy hay en la política es unos cuantos que no logran entender a las grandes mayorías. Solamente si hacemos política de ponernos en los zapatos de los otros, vamos a tener una civilización que evolucione. Perdón que repita siempre, el debate es sobre la civilización humana. El debate no es solamente entre México y Estados Unidos, es hacia dónde queremos llevar al planeta. Porque ¿qué le va a hacer un muro? Pensando que está aquí WWF, ¿no? Es correcto. Bueno, pues ¿qué le va a hacer un muro a los animales que tienen que pasar de un lado de otro? Al agua, ¿no? A las condiciones medioambientales, pues le va a generar un terrible deterioro. Bueno, fíjate cómo estamos hablando de algo que es superior a solamente el flujo de personas. Entonces es pensar como seres humanos de una manera distinta cómo resolver los problemas. Entonces, creo que ese es el tipo de diálogo y el tipo de liderazgo que hoy quiere un mundo que está cambiando y que está en una posibilidad de despertar hacia una mejor interacción entre los seres humanos, donde no sea el miedo lo que impere, sino sea la armonía. Frente al miedo, armonía, ¿no? Es como Yoda, ¿no? Paco Fiber is a good friend of mine for more than 20 years. He loves Star Wars such as me, right? And he knows that Yoda says, no? Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads you to anger. Anger leads you to hate. Hate leads you to violence, ¿no? Bueno, es donde está instalado. Hay otra forma de entender, ¿no? Is hope leads you to joy. Joy leads you to happiness. Happiness leads you to harmony. There are two ways to doing politics. Two ways, two paths, two different ways of viewing. Hay dos formas de entender cómo hacer. Si seguimos a Yoda, que es en algunos sentidos superior para entender la política, bueno, pues hay que ver que hay una forma de entender esa forma de construir puentes. Y creo que, dicho ya más en serio en términos de política, construir una dinámica que combata el crimen organizado no es rocket science, digamos, no es un tema que tenga que ver con ciencia oculta, tiene que ver con retos gravísimos y peligrosos, pero tiene que ver con evitar que la corrupción sea lo que haga un entendimiento y una simbiosis entre la política y el crimen. Hay políticos de un tipo y hay políticos de otro. Hay políticos honestos, habemos políticos honestos, habemos políticos que creemos que esta profesión sirve para ayudarle a la gente a evolucionar en su vida, en su felicidad. Y hay políticos que no. Bueno, la democracia te debe de ayudar a diferenciar a uno de otro. En el caso de México, ¿cuál es mi propuesta? Espero que no esté equivocada, pero creo firmemente en ella. Haz campaña con poco dinero. Dentro de la irracionalidad que eso significa, es tan potente y poderosa porque la evidencia empírica te dice que la locura no es querer hacer política sin dinero, sino que la locura es estar haciendo política con tanto dinero, porque te termina llevando a un desastre en términos de la relación comunitaria. Bueno, ¿hace sentido decir esto en este momento? Sin duda. Oye, ¿esto va a ganar? ¿Es un destino manifiesto? Claro que no. No es un destino manifiesto. Se construye en el diálogo con la gente, con la inspiración, en la construcción de empatía y entender que ese reto común pues, te puede llevar a un mejor estadio. Es el despertar que yo hablo. ¿Hay posibilidades de hacerlo? Claro, por eso están ganando los candidatos que están ganando, porque la tecnología hoy te mueve la información 100,000 veces más rápido que te la movía hace apenas 3, 4 u 8 años. Eso lo que te permite es organización, y la organización con información lo que te da es poder. Power to the people. Esto hace sentido más allá de rhetoric. Esto hace sentido porque es mucho más eficiente administrar los recursos, es mucho más eficiente administrar la democracia. Yo creo firmemente que hay un ya para último decir Star Wars, ¿no? There is a way to kill the Death Star, ¿no? There's only one shot.
No me ha contestado la última.
A ver, échale.
Los estrechos con Estados Unidos, si usted fuera a notar.
Sin duda alguna. A ver, no tener lazos estrechos con la nación, no tener lazos estrechos con la nación más poderosa del mundo sería suicida. Pero además de todo sería poco inteligente. Una de las grandes bendiciones que tiene un país como México, pese a que ello le genera también muchas complicaciones, es tener 3,000 kilómetros de frontera con los Estados Unidos. Es un reto, sin duda, mal manejado, puede ser hasta una amenaza, pero sana e inteligentemente entendido, entendiendo los problemas compartidos, dialogando, construyendo, es la posibilidad de tener en el hemisferio norteamericano, como lo creo firmemente, la región más competitiva y más próspera del mundo. Y México se puede convertir en los próximos años en un país que sea la nueva Alemania. Not the new Afghanistan, the new Germany. We have a huge territory. We have a huge population. And we have the will to do it. Well, let's build it. Yo creo que esa es la visión y me parece que es donde hay que construirla.
Yo creo que ya llegó la
Allá.
hora de cerrar.
Gracias.
The question of him was, what do you think about elected representatives? I think citizens in the District of Columbia need to be citizens of first class, not second class citizens. They must have the same rights that all the people in the United States.
Bueno, queremos agradecerles muchísimo por una increíble charla. Hemos hablado de inmigración, de la política mexicana y hasta de Star Wars. Así que ha sido una noche encantadora. Y por parte de nuestra organización, un humilde regalo. Y quiero, queremos darle un aplauso enorme a nuestro invitado, señor senador. Y antes de finalizar, tenemos unas palabras de nuestra secretaria, Ruth Pagani, y nuestro...
Voy a ser breve. I'm going to be very... Oh, my voice carries. But anyway, I'm going to be very brief. If any of you enjoyed this conversation, we want to continue to have these sorts of meetings to discuss issues that are pertinent to the Latino community, whether internationally or domestically. Quiero que ustedes una pequeña surgencia. Si ustedes estaban encantados con la conversación hoy, quiero que ustedes piensen en 100 miembros, $20 por año. If you like this, please consider being a member. It's $20 a year. If we want to keep having these conversations, we need to have the resources to be able to have snacks and be able to rent rooms and to do these kinds of things. So please consider it. We have flyers in the back, okay, for membership, and also before you, and also online, and on your way out, please feel free to take whatever you want from the food table